Okay, great. Okay, we'll start
Roger that.
now.
Gen 4, ready to go.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay in the start. This is obviously a very popular talk in our Meet the Linden series. And so we're getting off to a bit of a slow start, getting all the ducks lined up. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient. And we are talking today to Ebbe Linden, the CEO of Linden Lab, and Joe. I'm joined by Joe Yardley of the 1920s Berlin project. Perhaps I should call you Frau Yardley.
Oh, we don't need to be that formal tonight.
Good.
For a change.
So, Joe, do you want to kick off with your first question?
Yes, well, we've got a few questions. Of course, I hope we get to listen to the audience as well at the end. Let's start with Second Life. You've been in charge for a while now. Are there any things, Ebbe, that have changed in the time that you've been in charge that you are especially proud about, as something of a bit of a personal achievement?
Yeah. There's a number of things. I think primarily it's the relationship between the lab and residents, I think is much better today. It was a little bit tense, I would say, the relationship when I came aboard, and it seems to be much more casual and fun and collaborative, and I think many of you have seen more of us than you had for a while previously. I'm also proud of the quality of the product, the performance. We've made lots of strides in quality, like chat had huge amounts of issues. So we made a lot of progress on just making it a more stable product, a better performing product. And I'm also proud of the focus we have at the lab. When I came on board, there was quite a few projects sprinkled about, and today I feel we have what I called 4 very strong focus areas with really good drive across each of them. And so it feels more like a healthier environment, not just between us and residents, but also amongst us Lindens, and a better quality product and a better focused organization. So I'm pleased with the progress.
Can you tell us what those 4 areas of concentration are?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, continue to improve Second Life is something that we do, and you guys often hear from Oz and Danger on our progress there. We have Blocks World, a fairly small team working on this neat little app for a younger audience to be able to build little virtual experiences on the iPad. We have obviously a very huge investment in Project Sansar, next generation experience platform. And we've worked really hard for over a year now, and we'll start to get some external customers on board, in just a month or so, just a few, but it's great progress. And the 4th one I would say is compliance, making sure that we run a tight ship when it comes to the Linden dollar and who can cash out, and just being running a tight ship when it comes with compliance, and whether that's fraud controls, identity controls, a number of things we need to do to make sure that we and banks and everybody are comfortable with the business that takes place in Second Life. So those are the 4 areas of focus.
Continuing.
Sorry.
Continuing. Just want to ask the last thing you said about cashing out and things. You've said before that you want to speed that up. Is there any idea on when this is going to happen, or how is the progress to that?
The progress is good. We've now managed to automate a lot of things so that we can see what percentage we would be willing to pay out rapidly in an automated fashion. We're still tuning the rules as to who we would trust to pay out, to make sure that we're 100% certain that the people that would get paid out should be paid out. And we'll continue to increase that percentage by continuing to dial the rules and make tweaks. And when we get to a significant enough a percentage, then we should start being able to automate the actual process as well, not just the data saying we could, but that we actually will pay out. And so I don't have a date for exactly when we can turn that on, but it's our goal for the vast majority of people that we have a trusted relationship with to be able to pay in within 24 hours or something. I mean, there's always external processes as well that we're not 100% in control of, but on our end, once someone clicks the button and says, I want to be paid out, then we hope to, within 24 hours, be able to automatically say, start the process. And then, like I said, there's some external dependencies for how quickly that actually takes place.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you've given compliance an equal status with the other 3 projects. I wouldn't necessarily say they're all equal, but it's a focus area, and it's very important for us to run, to be able to run a trusted, large-scale business, to make sure that fraud cannot take place for the sake of us as a business, as well as for the sake of you not having bad things go on. So it is an important aspect. Yeah. Danger was actually saying yesterday that it's actually one of Linden Labs' advantages coming into Sansar, because all the new virtual worlds that are planning to come online have got to get this right, and you have a head start.
Yeah, we absolutely are pretty much alone in having had a virtual currency with a floating exchange with cash out and all these capabilities. There's no one else like it. So yes, we have a pretty significant leg up compared to others. If your intent is to have a virtual economy like we do, I mean, there are other business models that one could apply, but the way we are doing it, there's no one else really doing it as well as we do. So, and that's something we will certainly leverage both operational experience and technology as we move forward with Sansar.
Let's go back to Second Life for a little bit longer before we move into Sansar completely. Second Life still gets some negative feedback in the media, although maybe it's just me, but it seems like it's becoming a lot less recently, and Second Life's reputation is slowly but surely improving. But which kind of negative feedback that you pick up, both in the media, but also from people in Second Life themselves, that annoys you the most?
Well, it's not that much that annoys me. I don't see. Maybe you guys have felt more negative. I've only had the opportunity to hear negativity for about a year. Maybe you guys have had the opportunity to feel it longer. But I hear very little of it. Whomever I talk to, it's mostly from surprise that it's still around, or more neutral. It's very rare that I run into people that says start off with the negative. So I think that's a very small percentage of the population, and usually the negative people tend to be quite loud. So, but it's not something I stress about. I guess my biggest annoyance is people's intolerance for various types of content. And when you look at the content in the real world, and people's tolerance for that content in the real world, and then suddenly when it's in a virtual space, then oh my God, then there's like a different level of acceptance for all kinds of content for some reason, and that annoys me. So when people say whatever subject matter is, I can always draw a parallel to how it's so much worse, or has just as much interesting stuff going on in the real world as Second Life, whether it's art, whether it's sex, whether it's whatever it is. Like, all of this stuff is all around us in the real world. So why would suddenly it not be completely reasonable and acceptable to also have that in a virtual world? That's maybe the most annoying part, when people don't get that.
Now, I know that your family have come into Second Life as well, that you actually have a family home here in Second Life and have had that for some time before you became CEO. So presumably they get Second Life as well. But when you're talking to friends, do you tend to, perhaps you have a circle of friends who do get Second Life as well? If they're new to it, how do you explain what your job is?
Well, it sort of depends a little bit on the context of who I'm trying to explain it to, and it also really depends on their experience with various things. But generically, I try to explain that we're trying to create a three-dimensional canvas that users can choose how to fill it and how to populate it with what types of experiences, and that we want to offer as much freedom as possible to allow people to create as much stuff that they can imagine. So kind of suggesting to people that in something like Second Life, you can be whatever you want and do whatever you want, create whatever you want, as long as it's legal and as long as it's sort of somewhat appropriate for the rest of us. So, but then you can go into sort of the incredible breadth of things that are really already working so well in Second Life, whether it's education, health, art, role-playing, and that there's almost as much variety of hobbies and interests and creations and experiences in something like Second Life, like people can enjoy in their real lives. So, yeah, it's sometimes tricky because it's so broad. It's so many different things to so many different people. So that usually in a conversation you have to sort of figure out what is of interest to the other person and sort of figure out how to relate to them with subject matter that they can relate to or understand. And that's part of the challenge of trying to explain something that's so broad, because it's obviously easier to explain a product that's extremely narrow in its application or focus. So it's always a bit of dialogue that usually makes it easier than just sort of a simple statement. It's hard to think of a simple statement that sort of captures it all for everybody.
Have you had a chance to look around Second Life 12B here yet?
Yeah, I buzzed around. I think it was 2 days ago. I was probably in there for like, I don't know, half an hour or so I didn't get too deep in too many things. But really enjoyed some techno music over in the corner somewhere for a while. And saw some fascinating sort of art and creations, all kinds of interesting music. But yeah, not nearly enough time to really have a chance to see all of it.
Well, I think people could probably put in chat some destinations you could go to that they'd recommend around the birthday.
There's no shortage of recommendations that I wish I had time to follow up on all of them.
So, what do you like doing most in Second Life? And I don't mean kind of working in meetings. I'm sure you absolutely adore those. But when you have free time and you come into Second Life, what do you enjoy doing?
Mostly traveling and socializing. Just going to interesting places and see who I can bump into and strike up conversations and just see what people are making and doing. So for me, it's more of a, traveling and meeting people. That's what I find the most interesting.
Is it usually undercover, or do you prefer to just use your Ebbe avatar?
I'm pretty much almost exclusively as myself. I really don't I have an alt, but I rarely use it. I don't really find a huge need to go undercover. In some contexts, maybe people would talk to me slightly differently, but there's so many people too that don't necessarily even realize who I am. I think the vast majority of people inside don't even know who I am, so they just speak honestly with me anyway. And I try to just be honest with people when I talk to them, so they even know that, oh, it's the CEO, that sort of wears off really quick, and then we just have normal conversation like anyone else. So, yeah.
Okay, well, let's try and move on to the future for the next 12 years. Second Life first. Is there anything exciting coming for Second Life itself? We've already heard from Danger that mysecondlife.com is not going to be improved anytime soon, which I think is a bit of a shame. But is there any other exciting changes and improvements coming in the near future?
Yeah, I'm probably just repeating what Danger said, but we are working on a number of areas that's going to improve. There's still some more performance improvements being worked on. We'll get the media and the prim to be completely modernized so that you have like a proper current web rendering tech, and so you can get HTML5 and WebGL to function on a prim. Experience key is going to be rolled out soon, grid wide, so that we can see more people taking advantage of those capabilities. And I know the team, our Patches team, is also working on a neat next sort of fun experience to share with you all. So that will come out sometime in July as well, I believe. So those are just some of the things that are in the somewhat near future.
There's a question coming out in the audience at the moment that I know that's one of my things, which is, will last names come back to Second Life? Because last names rock, yes.
We will probably not have last names anytime soon. Every time we look at what we can achieve with the resources we have, there's so many things that I believe would have more impact on a broader scale. I mean, there's a lot of work that's going to go into sort of the whole acquisition funnel of how users get onboarded, and I think Pete talked a lot about this the other day about our upgraded landing pages and advertising, banner ads through sort of optimized landing pages, already seeing a big lift in conversion rates on getting those rolled out. And then we also want to make sure that the transition into Second Life becomes an easier one, and whether that's making sure that slurls get straightened out so that you can send those around and expect people to successfully show up at the end of that slurl rather than get lost in some weird labyrinth of pages. Mm-hmm. And also get going on gateways, experiment with some gateways, and continue to do all kinds of A/B tests for what ways can we and allow you guys to ultimately do things to more easily bring people into Second Life. That's probably where we're going to spend more of our energy than anything else beyond what I mentioned earlier.
Do you agree with a lot of people in the media, even though some are very skeptical, that VR really is about to get really, really big, that we are at the renaissance of VR, and that perhaps soon every house will have a VR headset, and that Second Life will, of course, and Sansar will be able to use that, be part of that?
I'm a huge believer in VR, but it's going to take time. But as we build Sansar, we have to obviously have the expectation that Sansar is going to be around for decades. I mean, look at Second Life. It's 12 years in, and it's still doing really, really well. And Second Life is going to be around for much, much longer. So we have to invest in something that where we think of something that is going to be relevant 10 years from now and longer. And in that time frame, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, absolutely VR is going to make huge impact in how people interact with one another and the world around them. And I think I can hardly think of any particular business or use case that will not be impacted by VR, whether it's architecture, education, travel, health. All of them are going to find ways to do things in really, really interesting ways because of VR. So yes, we're making a big bet that Sansar is going to be a great way for people to create experiences that take advantage of VR in a really great way. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, we've got a couple of questions. I was going to ask, one of them is that whether Sansar will work with Microsoft HoloLens, and I guess I'd like to broaden that out a little and ask, are you planning, I mean, as Second Life has lasted 12 years, presumably you've got to plan for technologies that haven't even been created yet to access it, like, you know, when people created Second Life, I guess there wasn't a huge expectation that people would want to access Second Life on their mobile phones back in 2004. And I guess with the same, there's going to be all sorts of virtual headsets and ways of interacting coming down the line. You're presumably going to have to work a bit in the blind on that with Project Sansar.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that are going to happen that we can't predict, but there's also a lot of things going on that we can predict fairly well. It will take a while for the VR market to sort of shake out who are going to be the winners and losers and what types of devices, whether it's the HMDs or the head-mounted displays like the Oculus or the Vive from Valve or the Morpheus from Sony and or whatever Google's cooking up, you know, going beyond cardboard. And some of those will make it, some of those will not make it, or some of them might become quite niche, and some of them might be broadly applicable. Some of them might be easy for us to add support for. Hopefully, you know, over time things will settle down a little bit on what types of input devices and what types of devices most people prefer to use. And so we have to sort of pick our battles of what things we want to support and not to support. Input is a complicated one because there's lots of ways to interact with the world when you have an HMD on. You know, you have things from leap motion where you use your hands to, you know, these new touch controllers coming out from Oculus to the controllers coming out from Valve to the sticks that coming out from Sony, and each of them, so several of them have fairly similar sort of feature set, and you can sort of have a generic technology that allows you to sort of support more and more of those, but some of them will also require different user interface, and that's when it gets really complicated because we don't want the application to have too many different user interfaces for too many different use cases because it gets really cumbersome to support all of that. So for now, we're just focusing on Oculus, and then we're still a year away from consumers starting to buy this stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out and what becomes popular and therefore what things we should latch on to. And then separately, we just have to make sure that we build Sansar sort of in an intelligent way, in a modular way, so that it's easy to extend support for new technologies over time, or if some portion of Sansar needs to be completely redone, you can redo that portion without having to sort of redo everything else. So it's the right level of modularity and architecture, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about that stuff up front, which is why it's taken quite a while to get, you know, the start of Sansar sort of out to the world, because it just takes a lot of sort of architecture and plumbing to make sure we build a good base that we can comfortably then, you know, invest, you know, decades on top of.
And one question that's been, well, I think it's been asked for over a year, and it keeps coming back, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Will we ever see the return of second names in Second Life, and will there be second names in Sansar?
No, I don't think, I think you asked this already, but I don't think we're going to do last names in Second Life anytime soon. We have too many other priorities that we continually find to be more important. It's not like, I mean, if I could snap my fingers and give it to you, sure, but it would take more work than that. And when we look at our priorities and what projects have the biggest bang for buck for us, that just constantly doesn't sort of it sort of falls below the cutoff line constantly. So I would not expect that to change.
But what kind of name system can we sort of expect for Sansar? Is there anything?
I wouldn't say that's completely finalized yet. We will probably have to do something similar because we want people to be able to, at least so far, our goal is for people to be able to use their identity across Second Life and Sansar, so you can log in with your same credentials on both sides. So for starters, in Sansar, it's just going to be sort of, you'll be able to have a display name, and you'll have a email and password, and we start very simple, but we also architected in for what we call personas, so that over time you can have multiple personas associated with your account and choose which persona you want to use in a particular context. But that's further down the road. But last names, as you know them from before, is not something we're necessarily actively pushing to bring back right now.
We talked a bit about personas and how that would work with an account with Danger yesterday. One thing that a lot of businesses, when they're run by more than one person, would find very useful is the ability for two separate accounts to share one access, like a business manager account. Could you see that happening?
Well, with personas, we imagine that you will be able to log in once with your credentials, and then have multiple personas underneath that account. Each of those personas could have its own, avatar and account, so that you can transfer currency amongst them. You probably still only have maybe one, USD account or a real money account, but as far as a virtual currency account, you could sort of move money between these personas. And so you could sort of log in and then choose, I want to be this persona because now I'm going into 1920s Berlin and I want to be that character dressed that way, and whatever, and then you come out and you want to go somewhere else, you can switch personas without having to sort of log out and log back in again as under a different account. So we've architected to support that, but it's not something we're going to have, day one, because it's going to take quite a while before that becomes a key requirement for Sansar, well over a year from now, before that becomes a critical aspect. That becomes more critical when you have a rich avatar system where people can really have a strong personalized identity associated with their avatar. And that's not necessarily something that's going to be there from the beginning in Sansar. In the beginning, we're focused more on how you can create a great environment, a great experience, and then later on, where we'll start in earnest is probably sometime early next year, is to then start building up how you can also create a really strong avatar and persona.
And Danger Linden also talked about that every new user is going to get a certain amount of land for free with the basic account. Any idea how we have to imagine this, how much land that will be, and if the people who rent out land at the moment, the landlords, should be worried?
Well, I guess a lot of different types of businesses could be worried, or they could just, look for opportunities. The business model will be different in Sansar. I've continually said that I believe land is too expensive in Second Life, and that we need to bring land prices down, and subsequently then for us to make sure we make a reasonable amount of income for the lab, we need to bring sort of taxation on the GDP up. So we have to think about what taxation is there on transactions in the system. We have to mix that then with different subscription models for different types of capabilities. And then, so we're constantly trying to think of how we can push land costs, how far down can we push it, and make sure that we can make up that revenue or sufficient revenue in other ways. Because one thing that bothers us a lot is that the cost of land in Second Life is actually preventing a lot of great content from being created and to kept around. And if you're in sort of the user-generated space these days, putting a limit on how much content can be created is not a good idea. So
How far do you think you can push it down?
I don't know, but I hope a lot. And so, and it also depends on what capabilities you want to have on that land, what kind of concurrency and what kind of capabilities. And we're still playing with a lot of those variables, and I'm sure no matter how much we think we have it figured out, I'm sure we haven't. And then when reality sets in and we start working with the product with real users, that we're going to keep fiddling with it. But we want, like Danger said, make it easy for people to come on board and be able to start create stuff without any significant hurdle. Now, how much land, how persistent will that be? For example, something we'll do in Sansar that we don't do in Second Life is, if there's no one on land, well, then we can just store it away. And when you come back, we can load it back up. In Second Life, everything, whether someone is actively using that land or not, is occupying CPUs and GPUs, doing, just taking up server space. And so we can be more efficient with that. So if someone wants to come in and tinker and then they leave, maybe a minute later we just, save that out on disk, and that CPU can be freed up for something, where there's activity. So that can help us scale a lot. And so maybe if you want that land to always run hot so that anyone who visits it gets instant access as opposed to having to wait for it to load or something, well, then maybe you have to pay a little more to have it run hot all the time. So we'll still futzing with this, but just in general, our goal is for property tax to come way down and sales tax to come up, and then figure out where's the equilibrium, where it's the right balance between the two, plus other opportunities to generate revenue as well. But yeah, the cheaper we can make land, in my opinion, the better.
Absolutely.
I've actually got a question relating to Second Life here from Kenny-Lex Luckless, who said, could we get bigger free land plots for premium or long-term residents, like 1024 instead of 512?
We are exploring opportunities in Second Life as well for other type of, land packages or land products, if you will. And we are thinking about if there are possibilities for us to reduce prices of land. We are exploring whether we can introduce other types of land with other dimensions and prim limits or whatever that would be appealing to users that don't want to fork out for a full region today. So we spend a lot of time discussing these things. I mean, sometimes we get nervous about how many more users would we get? How much more activity would we get? If we reduced land price by X percent, would we get that back, or would we just make it a pure donation to all of you, which I'm sure you would appreciate, but wouldn't necessarily help us at the same time. So we want to make sure we get return on that investment of introducing additional products. We also have to think about, if we introduce new land products, what kind of what would that do to other land products? What percentage of people that have full regions would go to one of these other land products, and what impact might that have on our revenues? It's complicated, but trust me, we debate this all the time. And that's, and also for different types of use cases and different users. Are there even more we can do for educational nonprofits? Are there ways we could? So this is a continuous dialogue amongst us. And I hope we can figure out something to test in a reasonable time frame to provide other land products to Second Life.
Someone asked, and I think it's quite an interesting question, have you thought about hiring economists to look at the potential economy and to craft a working model?
I know the lab has had economists on staff or in advisory roles in the past. We have a fairly smart group of people, from the CFO to business operations people to people like Patch that has been doing this for a long time, that we can probably figure out most of this amongst ourselves. But if we feel the need, we would. It's a fascinating puzzle, that's for sure.
Please let us know when you're running out of time, because the hour is almost finished and we know that you've got a meeting coming up. Until you say you're leaving, we're just going to continue forever and ever.
Yeah.
We got a late start, so let's keep going a little bit longer,
Brilliant.
like another 15 minutes or so.
It's been mentioned, and I'm sorry I forgot who mentioned it, but it's been mentioned, people talking about SLGo and streaming and things like that. Streaming was a wonderful service that we experienced from SLGo, and it's now being experienced with by Bright Canopy, and I think another one as well. And I think that the people who are missing out on streaming at the moment are really desperate for something like it to return. Is there a chance that Linden Lab is looking into something again? I think it was mentioned yesterday as well, but people keep mentioning it.
Yeah, no, we are looking at it, and we're talking directly to some of the suppliers of those capabilities. Like you obviously have a close relationship with Amazon, and they have a product in this area, and unfortunately, running a server with high-powered GPUs comes at a high cost. And so to offer something like what SLGo did, obviously didn't work out for them in the end. They had to sort of bail out and just get bought for patents because, it was tough to make a business model around it where users are willing to pay the cost that it takes for a company to not only cover the cost of all those servers, but then to also make some margin on top of that. So it's a tough one. I think over the years, those cloud-based GPU services will come down in cost, and it will reach a point by which that is a completely reasonable way for us to distribute our product. I'm not sure if it's there today. If we wanted to cover our costs with that, we would have to, stick you with a pretty hefty bill, and I'm not sure enough of you would be willing to pay that to cover the cost for us. And then if we can't get enough users to buy it, then it would be a big investment for us for a handful of people to enjoy. But it's clear that it's for a number of use cases, including mobile and lower-powered PCs. This is a great solution to create a really well-performing product. But so it's something that we're going to continue to evaluate and going to continue to have dialogue. I think we'll see more and more of these capabilities being offered by Amazon's, Microsoft's, others. I know NVIDIA is working on stuff that probably some of those guys actually collaborate with to hopefully at some point make this of sufficient scale and cost that it makes sense for us to create a product on top of it. Today, the math doesn't really work out.
Yeah, I know one of the SLGo guys told me that SLGo itself, not on live wasn't doing very well, but SLGo on its own was getting close to being profitable. But then, of course, that's what they would say. I don't know anything about money and numbers above 8, but it's definitely interesting, something to look at.
Yeah, and you saw where they started with their pricing models. Those pricing models started out to cover their cost, and then they realized that was not something you guys were willing to pay for, and then they ultimately went to $10 all you can eat per month, and it's not clear to me if that would have reached enough of an audience to sort of be
not in time anyway.
Yeah,
it was getting there.
Yeah, so, but anyway, it's something we continue to evaluate, and it's certainly for Sansar, we'll continue to look at it as well.
Yes, please.
And it's one way to deliver a mobile experience in a performant way, but we also have a lot of stuff to do to make sure we can get a really performant client that can do a lot of this stuff. So, I believe it's in our future, just not today.
Yeah.
A question that was asked earlier by Dean Ashby is, what about copybotting? His specific question was, will people be able to sell in Sansar without payment on file? That's one way of, copybotters often use kind of free accounts like that. Are you looking for ways to protect against copybotting in Sansar?
Well, so there's like a couple of questions there. Can you sell without payment on file? I don't know yet. What we want to do in Sansar, and maybe Danger spoke about this, was we want to have a more sophisticated system as to the more we know about you, the more we trust you, and the more we let you do. And so whether payment on file is a requirement to sell or not, I don't know what decision we'll come to. And even if we had made a decision today, we'll find that is wrong 2 years, 1 year from now. So it's hard to say. But and as far as copy botting, ultimately there is no 100% copy-proof system. I mean, just look at DRM with regards to music, with video games, with anything on the internet, and someone can always find a way to steal. And so there is no 100% waterproof copy protection. We will obviously try and make sure that we do everything we can to make it a worthwhile investment for content creators to create their content and make a market where people can run successful businesses. That's sort of our core is, the creator's king. Our product is primarily targeted for creators to be able to create experiences that their users can then enjoy. And we cannot have successful creators that can run large, successful businesses if there are all kinds of problems associated with that, including stealing and stuff like that. So it's going to be important. Can I guarantee that everybody's stuff will never be stolen in Sansar ever? No, because it's impossible. I think we'll do enough to make sure that it's a very successful platform for creators to run businesses on top of.
Right. I had a question about music. Will there be improvements for Second Life, like making sound files longer than 10 seconds and making other types of streaming media than the MOV format available?
Oh yeah. We're already making good progress on that in Sansar. There's so many things we can do completely differently in modern ways. So streaming content, having more control over audio, a much more, a better 3D sound, much better understanding of space and materials and how that affects sounds. We want, and in VR, doing correct audio is extremely important. It's part of the immersion. If you have someone talking from behind you and you can't clearly tell that it's coming from behind you, that breaks the immersion. So making sure we get spatial audio right and all kinds of other audio correct is absolutely essential to Sansar.
Do you think that, can you say anything, I know it's very early days, but can you say anything about the minimal technical requirements for running Project Sansar? I mean, will we all have to buy even better computers or will it run easier than Second Life?
I don't think we know yet. I mean, our goal is to obviously enable it on as many machines as possible. Mm-hmm. How Sansar will ultimately perform on side-by-side versus Second Life on the same hardware, I think it's too early to tell yet. Our goal is to not require anyone to have to buy new hardware to use Sansar if they can successfully use Second Life today. But I can't guarantee that that's going to be the case. I mean, some of the things we're doing will make Sansar way more performant than Second Life, just in how we're doing the technology, and they allow sort of pre-baking of content and stuff we can do. But it's still hard to say, in order for us to get all the capabilities we want, that the same graphics card you have today will still be, an ideal solution for Sansar. Now, if you want to use VR, then there are sort of performance requirements that we're also not fully in control over. I mean, Oculus is setting their specs for what they, deem to be the minimal spec. So that's maybe a level that's beyond most of us today, since their graphics card requirement is sort of a really new one. And so most of us probably are not there yet, unless you already own a Titan or something. But we're not going to have a requirement that you need to have that spec to run Sansar on a PC. So, yeah. So the goal is to not require new hardware, but I can't guarantee that that'll be true for everybody.
One question that I think could have quite a few people here in the audience cheering or wincing. Will inventory also be free in Samsar?
Yeah, I don't think we want to try. I can't guarantee. I mean, the ways we want to try and make money and bring down. I see a question here: OpenGL or DirectX for Sansar? Well, ultimately both. How we try and we want land to be cheap. What are all the other ways we want to sort of find ways to make revenues? But again, that would be something to me that could potentially reduce content creation, and anything that gets away from content being created is not in our interest. So and storage is not that expensive. So charging people for storage is kind of, those days have sort of come and gone.
Phew, I've got an entire city in my inventory. That would be scary. I want to bring up education. Will Second Life and, of course, Sansar become more interesting for educators in the future, for instance, by allowing them to build a sim where the people who use it can't get out or can't get in, so you're quite safe to, for instance, have a display and show it to children without someone teleporting in or suddenly half the classroom going to, an X-rated sim?
I don't know that yes, will Sansar be a more appealing product for educators? Yes, I believe so. Not just because of, the quality, cost, a number of factors. But I don't know that we figured out exactly how much can a particular experience constrain. And at some point, you almost get to like a white label business where each experience is sort of a completely standalone thing. And, maybe that will be offered someday, but maybe that comes at an extra price, because part of the value for us is to have a network where users can sort of meet each other. So a school that gets really cheap land that'll build this great experience on, and there's 20 students coming in and out, but those students never go out to the rest of Sansar or Second Life to do some shopping and become users of other things, that ends up having less value for us. So.
But of course, these students, once they are, have had their school lessons in Sansar, may very well return as permanent users.
Yes. If they're, but that means that's part of the process is you sort of want to make them aware of what else they can do. So it's maybe someone, and maybe that comes at a price where you can do lockdown, So it sort of feels like almost like a exclusive white label experience. At some point, you can start getting into true white label where they can have their own namespace of users and identities and the whole shebang. But that's kind of a different business model. We rather sort of have one namespace of users where we make it easier for people to move about. And yes, there will obviously be areas, and we're going to do things that are going to make it easier for us to contain certain content to certain areas. And yes, we'll figure out how to make it, impossible, because we've said already we want 13-year-olds and up to be able to come on board. And obviously we don't want those users to come in contact with users or content or users that are here for a completely different reason. So those are things we'll sort out with time.
So, someone just asked, what physics engine are you going to be using in Sansar? What path interpolation?
Well, we're not really talking about, because a lot of these things we're licensing tech, and we're in negotiation with various parties about different things, so we don't really reveal yet what some of the innards are, but we're using a very modern physics engine. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And someone else asked whether you're working with NVIDIA. Would there be another kind of technology you might be interested in, possibly?
Well, I don't know if with NVIDIA, we probably talk a lot, primarily about driver issues and stuff like that. But I don't know if NVIDIA will have a particular technology that will directly use in Sansar. But we do talk to a lot of third parties about technologies. There's no way we can build everything ourselves, and so we constantly try to make the decision between build, buy, or rent when it comes to technology. And it's a long list of third parties that are part of the equation for whether it's physics or lighting or facial expression, and you can go on and on and on with people that we're either have contract with and that we're sort of totally dependent on at this point, or people that we're ongoing having conversations with to evaluate ways that we can bring their technology into Sansar.
Let's say it's a year after Sansar was launched. Where would you like to see Sansar? What's your idea of Sansar being a success?
Well, it depends on your definition of launch. We want to launch early, here in just, a month or so with just a handful of hand-picked users. So that's sort of a launch for us to start having basically an ongoing dialogue with those users. We're also starting to have dialogue with users that might be a little bit further out than that. And we also have to think about what use cases are relevant in Sansar at one point in time. Late this year, early next year, Sansar will be relevant for some use cases and be really cool for some use cases, and for other use cases will be completely not ready at all. And so we want to make sure that it's not one of these things where it's going to suddenly be born one day and it has everything. It's going to start out by having almost nothing, and then it becomes meaningful to someone. So right now we spend more time talking to architects than we're talking to others, because the ability to just walk through a space and communicate in a space, that's something we're going to be quite advanced on early on. But then, like I said, a sophisticated avatar system with highly customized and a marketplace for clothing and all that, that's not till way later next year. So that means that someone that has a dependency on avatar customization, well, there's no point in really talking to those kinds of users for a long time. So that's when you say launch, it's sort of a that's quite fuzzy. We'll be launching this year, but for other people, we will not be launching until next year. And for some other people yet, maybe not even until the year after that. So,
but how would you consider Sansar to have been a success?
Well, ultimately, we won't know that for a few years. But it's successful when it's easier than anything else to create a virtual experience. And when I talk about a virtual experience today, your options to create a sophisticated virtual experience, if you don't have something like Second Life or Sansar, is kind of like hire an engineering team, go license Unity or Unreal or something, and then start writing C++ code. Right? That's we want to eliminate those kinds of skill requirements in order to create a meaningful experience that people can share together.
Absolutely.
So when we can see that creators, and in the beginning, those creators will have to be more sophisticated because, like I said earlier, we'll start with Maya as the authoring tool until we can start introducing our own authoring tools into Sansar. And then over time, try to figure out more and more ways and to sort of lower the bar for how people can enjoy creating content. So it starts with something like Maya, and then we start creating in-world tools for layout and support more third-party tools. And at some point, we start to create in-world creation tools. And we have to then choose. There's no point in us trying to compete with Maya, Blender, 3D Max, SketchUp, and yada, yada. If people want to use those, great. If at some point we have to find what's the sweet spot where we can create tools that doesn't necessarily compete with those, but that adds additional use cases where people can create content, and whether that's in-world voxel tools or in-world other sort of simple tools for creating content, that's something we'll be, working on for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, we need those.
Yeah.
I want to ask two very quick questions, and then I'm going to throw to Joe, who's got a zinger as the final question, if that's okay. Have we got time to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, Gentle Heron was asking, this is a part one of two bits that I'm trying to go and squeeze in. Gentle Heron of Virtual Ability was asking, will you be developing voice to text and text to voice in Sansar?
I don't know that
It's very important assistive technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know that we will develop it, but we will probably at some point be able to introduce it without too much headache, because there will probably be a service offered by Microsoft or Google or someone that makes it easy for us to send them some text and back comes voice, or send them voice and back comes text. So once there's service out there that has a reasonable reasonable cost associated with it, then it becomes easy for us to integrate. But I wouldn't see us being the sort of voice translation or voice to text and text to voice business ourselves. So that would be something we would have to license or partner or something like that. So I see that as something that's, based on how good these guys are starting to get with doing those kinds of things, it just becomes when is the service and the cost appropriate for us to integrate? And then it doesn't seem to me that it should be a really complicated thing to do.
Fantastic. Second part, and there's going to be a third part as well, because I've just had a... How will the selection process work for alpha testers, beta testers with Sansar? Will you have an application available, or is the lab just going to handpick or approach specific existing residents and content creators in Second Life?
Well, that will continually morph over time. In the beginning, we can start with just people we already know that have the skill sets and also the patience and dedication to invest time in it. And it's going to be frustrating. Things are not going to work, and it's going to be buggy, and then one day we say, sorry, we have to swipe everything and launch new servers that, all your content had to be, eradicated, and we're starting over, and we don't want to have that be something that a lot of alpha users have to suffer through. So we'll start with some people that are, that can dedicate themselves, knowing all of those, all that pain that will come with it. And then when we start to see, hey, the reliability and the number of times we have to break content compatibility and sort of wipe content out, and it starts to stabilize, well, then we can open up the door for more and more and more people. And I want to get to the point as soon as possible where we don't have to sort of screen or something like that. But we also don't want to have, thousands of people coming in and then, spend 5 minutes and then go blog about how shitty it was. That doesn't help anyone. So, and so I'm hoping later this year we can have a much, broader set of users, but we're probably not till, first half of next year where we have sort of, full access for people to come in and monkey around. Yeah. Sure.
Well, if you can do an interview in Second Life, that proves that you're very, very patient. So Safia and I will be packing our suitcases.
Now, final bit from me. This comes from Painter Poinoisi. I'm not sure how I pronounce that. But your question, out of curiosity, how far will the avatar customization go in Sansar? Would there only be humanoid avatars natively, or some more sophisticated skeleton altering functions as well? Four-legged avatars are quite popular here in SL, for example. Would Sansar be so much more scalable?
while everything we've talked about so far has been to be much more flexible and scalable than Second Life has been, with customizable skeletons and all of that. But, we have barely started. I mean, we already have avatars in Sansar that, we use internally here that look very nice. But, in order for you to figure out how do you let people severely customize them, and then also have a marketplace where people can buy and sell clothing and have that fit. It's a really complicated system we have to build. But yes, we do want it to support, arbitrary legs and limbs and whatnot. But like I said, it's not till next year we really get going on that, and it probably won't be till over a year from now when we could say that that's sort of at a place where it starts to be where we want it to be. So we've got quite a bit of time to chat about that.
Excellent. Well, it is our birthday, all of our birthdays together in a way. So we're wondering if you've got a present for us. Maybe, maybe a super secret new scoop sort of thingy that everyone goes mad about if they hear it. No pressure.
No, I didn't bring any super scoop. And no bears. Sorry, no bears. What be a good scoop? I
Don't listen to anyone at Linden Lab telling you not to say certain things.
Yes. Just
blurt it out.
No, I don't have anything. Sorry. I can't think of anything. I mean, I pretty much tell you everything I know.
Well, I think people have found some great information here. Yes, I think we have talked about that, Max, about reduction in land prices with a tax on revenues to store owners. Max is just saying a tax would apply to all transactions like a sales tax. Can you clarify?
Well, there's more to be figured out. I mean, do you want to tax gifting? Well, but we do have to somehow get a bigger piece of the GDP than we're doing in Second Life. I mean, that's where we have to make up a lot of the difference in us being able to reduce land costs significantly. Now, there are other things we're going to do just to be operationally more efficient so that Sansar is a cheaper technology to run at scale than Second Life, and we can pass some of those savings along. But today, when we collect 5% on marketplace and 0% on in-world transactions, that's not going to be sustainable if we want to really move land prices down. So that's as much as I have for now.
All right, then. Anyone in the audience got something they really, really need to ask?
There's hundreds.
I've been trying to. I've seen lots of questions fly by, but if I read, I can't speak, and I also can't listen when I read. And my wife tells me that all the time. I'm on my phone reading, and she tells me stuff, and I'm like, "What? I can't hear. I can't read and listen at the same time." It's a male thing, maybe. I don't know.
All right, I've got one. Are there any remote employment opportunities with Linden Lab? Perhaps for people in Canada, or even more important, in Amsterdam?
Well, I mean, we're a fairly distributed organization already. I mean, we have offices in San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, Virginia, and also quite a few people working from the Moon Lab at home, but they're all U.S. based.
Oh, right.
The Moon Lab. Yeah, we don't have an office on the Moon yet, but but yeah, we're not necessarily having offices or employees outside of the U.S. creates all kinds of additional complexity. So it's not something we're looking to do at this point.
One final question, maybe a final question. What's the reason for not wanting third-party viewers in Sansar?
Well, it's not wanting them. It's just that we wanted to reduce the complexity of what we're trying to do, and open source is an additional complexity. Certainly early on, like 4 years in, will we decide to go open source on the viewer? I don't know. So it's not anti-open source or anti-third-party viewers, but it does create a lot of additional complexity, and we're trying to minimize those complexities early on, so that we can run faster. And ultimately, maybe focus more energy of thinking of extensibility of our viewer versus, full-fledged third-party viewers. Because, there's some people in back in the day, took advantage of that in all kinds of weird ways, and you would have to. So from a security point of view and speed point of view, we just felt that it was better to sort of not go that way starting out. And 3 years from now, I have no idea what we'll decide to do on something like that. But if we can provide the right level of flexibility and extensibility in our viewers so that people can add third-party tools and capabilities that we don't have time to develop in some sort of plug-in system or something like that, that might be more appealing to us than going full open source. But so it's a decision for us now to get to like a 1.0 faster.
Right.
Yeah, Danger Linden mentioned something, I think it was yesterday, about perhaps some add-ons and clip-ons and push-ons for third-party viewers. But that was yesterday, I think.
Yeah, and we want to make sure, obviously, that we can create a very customizable user interface. I mean, if you look at the HUDs that you can do in Second Life, that's pretty limited and pretty lame. So making it possible to extend so that when I walk into the experience, it's not just the experience itself, but sort of the user interface around the experience is highly customized for this experience. And so then you kind of have to supply the flexibility to sort of allow for sort of third-party capabilities to start to seep in there somewhere. So it's something we will consider. And so a lot of work going on now in just the architecture and the plumbing of an extensible user interface system that not only is easier to extend for us, but also easy to extend for the users, and then also can run across all the platforms. It's a mega challenge. So, but we're on it.
I can believe it. I'd just like to say to the audience, we have got people transcribing this chat. We have got Linden's transcribing this chat, and they may be able to address some of the questions that haven't been answered later on. So if you haven't been able to get your question answered, don't despair. We'll try and pick up on them later.
Yeah, and let's try and figure out a way to do this again not too far from now, and to also find other channels of communication.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I see a lot of questions here that are probably fairly easy to answer, and so, well, maybe Pete can get a long laundry list of questions and maybe see how many of them we can just quickly come up with answers for. So. Well,
we could offer you an interview on designing worlds, and we could do it in a public place, if you like, in the near future.
Sure, no problem.
And every week. I can't help trying.
Prime Minister's question time. You
Exactly.
Build a mock-up of the House of Commons, and you can be Prime Minister's question time.
Yes, maybe the audience versus the Lindens.
Yeah, maybe once a month. I mean, if you do it every week, then I think the fourth week will start to get a little boring. But
it's a deal.
Yeah. All right.
It's a verbal agreement.
Okay. Signed. Okay.
Woohoo.
All right. I gotta run now. Sorry.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yes,
thank you for staying a bit longer.
And terror on that note.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Today.
Yes.
I think everyone in the audience is going to say thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting, and I really enjoyed it, and look forward to doing it again soon.
You betcha.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Auf Wiedersehen. Well, that is a scoop.
It is rather, isn't it?
As far as I'm concerned, that is a scoop. That's a wonderful note to end with.
Yes.
And we'll start
Okay.
building our stages.
So you heard it here first.
Yes, monthly question time with the Lindens. It's coming someday.
It's coming soon.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for struggling against the lab to be here.
And not throwing any tomatoes at us.
Not yet. No, we just have to check the feeds.
Yes. I've thrown a few tomatoes at Skype, though.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you lot, but I need a schnapps. And another cigarette.
I've got some scotch and Diet Coke here, and I'm going to take another slap.
There we go. Let's start drinking.
Okay, I'm dropping out of in-world voice.
Rightio.
Okay. And we'll just be in Skype, Joe.